Good afternoon, everybody. I am hereby calling this business meeting of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation to order. And I've been notified, and so have you, that we've got a quorum, no proxies, and I appoint Shayla Shreves as recorder for the meeting. Shayla, do you accept that appointment? It's irrelevant, but.
I do, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I want to officially welcome all the members. Thank you for enduring me, first off, and another virtual meeting. As we go through this meeting and as we end the meeting, we will explore in the interim before the October meeting the possibility that we could meet in person. And that will, of course, depend on COVID conditions, and they are improving, and we hope that they stay that way, obviously. So, Shayla, as recorder, I'm turning to you for a roll call of the members. Can I, let's go ahead and do that. Are you all set?
Yes.
Okay.
So, please just say here if you're here. Mr. John Finley.
Yes, here.
John Fry. Didn't see him yet. Rick Gonzalez. Okay. Christopher King.
Here.
Luke Nichter.
Here.
Jay Vogt. I see Jay. Oh, Reno Franklin. See him. Mayor Simpson.
Here.
Yes. Brett Blanton.
Here.
Sandy Watts from USDA. Let's see her yet. Okay, Caroline Henry, DOI.
Here.
Richard Kidd from Defense.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
I see Dr. Pullman and is
I'm
Tom,
here.
Thank you.
No,
Tom,
he's not.
not
He
com-
won't be here today.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pullman. Kevin Bush from HUD. Not yet, okay. Colleen Vaughn.
I'm here, thank you.
And is Mr. Coase joining us?
No, he's not.
Okay. Michael Brennan.
Here.
Right, there he is. Beth Savage.
Present.
Beth. Paul Edmondson.
Present.
Ramona Bartos.
Present, good afternoon.
Hello. And Shasta is not here, I don't think. Valerie Grusing, are you here?
Yes, Shasta is on travel this week, but I'm here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Valerie. And Jordan Tannenbaum.
Here.
Yes. Okay, Paula Moore. Thought I saw Paula from NAPC.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. And Catherine Slick.
Here.
See her. And Ann Walker.
Here. Good afternoon.
Great. Okay. So by chance, did we add Mr. Fry or Mr. Gonzalez?
I'm here.
Okay, there's Rick. And anyone from USDA? Not here. Okay. Okay, Mr. Vice Chairman, that's our roll call.
Great. Thank you, recorder. And now to have some audience and member participation, I need a motion and I'll need a second to adopt the agenda, which I'm sure you've all looked at in your meeting books. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Chris.
I will second.
Great.
Reno
Okay.
and Beth do it together.
Oh, good. Even better. The more the merrier. Okay. And we're going to do this one in a simple voice vote. All those in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, it passes. And another opportunity, I need a motion and a second to adopt the minutes from the March business meeting, which again, were in your meeting books. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion. John Finley.
Thank you, John. And a second.
Ramona Bartos, I'll second.
All right, Ramona. Okay, great, good. All right, all those in favor of adopting the minutes from the March business meeting, say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, say nay. Okay, the motion is adopted. And thank you all. And we can now move to the first item in our provisional agenda, and that would be the Vice Chairman's welcome and report. So again, thank you all for taking the time if you're out of your busy schedules to join us today. We have a very, very full agenda and a number of important action areas as well. We have a guest speaker with us today, and so we want to make sure that we get everything in by 4:30. And I know I have your cooperation to do that. So without further ado, let's get involved with some of the things that I've been working on since the March 30th meeting. And at the top of the list is the Climate Change Task Force, which I chair and am continuing to chair. We had a meeting on May 23rd, and I really appreciate the high level of engagement, the topics that we discussed, very important discussions, and we will be updating you further on that meeting as we get through the agenda. But let me just say that the next meeting is coming up in July 21st. And I consider that a very important part of my responsibilities. The second area that I've been involved in terms of, particularly in terms of listening sessions, was the electric vehicle supply equipment exemption. I led one of the sessions with Indian tribes and Native Hawaiian organizations. We talked a lot about the draft exemption for electric vehicle supply equipment. I wasn't, unfortunately, I couldn't attend both, but fortunately, Reno was there to back me up, and Reno handled the other. And we learned, I'm sure you'd agree with me, Reno, a great deal from those consultations. And again, you're going to hear about that later when staff reports on that whole area of that particular exemption. But at this point, Reno, do you want to jump in and say anything about your impressions of the session that you led?
Yeah, trying to come off mute here, which is apparently smarter than I am, but I think I've successfully done it. Now, Jordan, yeah, thank you for leading and just setting the tone. You know, when you participate, it certainly elevates to tribes that we as an agency are taking this serious when we have the head of the agency there to talk with tribes and interact. So I thought it went well. I thought that the feedback we got from tribes was amazing. I also kind of want to do a little shout out to our staff, the ONA staff that did a good job of getting this prepared and together. It was a bit of a learning session for us. It was a listening session, but the best listening sessions are learning sessions. I walked away from that feeling like I had learned a lot on what the concerns of tribes were. So thanks again for that, Jordan. I know we're going to touch on it some more later.
Yep, my pleasure. And thank you, Rena. Okay, moving on to another area that I've been involved in, and recently, as with the task force and some of the other things we're going to be talking about, FIPSI, the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council. We're going to talk a little bit about one of the areas that we discussed there. But let me at this point just report briefly on the meeting that occurred most recently, last Friday. It gave us all the chances to talk about the progress that's being made in achieving the goals of the president's recently released permitting action plan. That plan, as I have learned, sets very important goals for improving the timeliness and effectiveness of environmental reviews for infrastructure projects. That, of course, was the main focus actually of a lot of what we're going to be talking about, the impact of that infrastructure legislation on our area of concern. Particularly, of course, the environmental reviews for infrastructure projects. And basically all of the members, and I didn't know about, I have to admit, FIPSI until I was in this position, but I'm very impressed with their work. And all of the members of FIPSI are required to come up with reports on how we're going to achieve our goals. And that certainly is something that we're working on as well. We spent a lot of time. In fact, the whole meeting was pretty much focused on offshore wind energy as an important part of the administration's plans for clean energy. And we then, of course, talked about infrastructure goals and jobs. And I did comment and I pointed out that in terms of Section 106 reviews, that we felt they've been progressing well. And I was able to mention that in terms of our support for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's activities, that we're using a section of our regs, the 36 CFR Part 800 regs, which allows the Ncpe to substitute for the 106 reviews and the information and documentation that's required. So that has enabled us to move forward in a timely way and an effective way. And I also pointed out that this area, particularly as we were talking about offshore wind energy, has put a huge burden on the Indian tribes and the SHPOs too. I think there, if I recall correctly, there's something like 7 projects that are offshore wind energy projects on the East Coast alone. And I appealed and I repealed and I requested my fellow members to think of ways that they can help, particularly tribes, deal with this volume of material that they have to review and the consultations, the many meetings that they have to participate in. And I'm happy to say that there was a response from the members that they appreciated the capacity, the need to deal with this capacity and find ways to assist the tribes, and that they would take that into consideration and do what they could. So that in a nutshell was both my direct involvement with this meeting and also what the FIPSI has been focusing on in their most recent meeting. And then lastly, I want to update you very briefly on the status of the executive director position, which, as we all know, has been vacant as the chairman's position since January of 2021. And I have to say, I am particularly fortunate, but we are all very, very, very fortunate to have Reed Nelson in that acting position. Let's all, yes, please, okay. And he's been there since March of this year. But I feel, now it's been over a year that I've been in the acting chairman's position. I think it's time that we address this vacancy, as I said in my memo to the members, and that we move forward and put a permanent executive director in place. And I'm happy to say that you all, I know you all have heard from most of you that you agree with that. So, you know, I understand that we wanted to hold off to allow Professor Bronin, when she arrives, to have a say in this, but I think the time has come. And particularly since I'm not exactly sure when she will be confirmed. As you know, we continue to await the Senate scheduling vote. She has been through the first step of this, but nothing is scheduled. And so I think it's time to move on and move forward. Javier, would you like to assist me in this process? Just say a few words about the recruitment process in case there are any questions that the members have about this as we're moving forward on this particular issue.
Sure. And just briefly, the way that the process will work, because this is a senior executive service position, is that we start with posting the job announcement in usajobs.gov. And the plan is to have that announcement out for 30 days. When that closes, our HR contractors at Interior will make a first cut of the clearly unqualified applicants. And then what remains will then go to a panel of senior executive service employees that will rate and rank those remaining applicants. Those who fall below a certain baseline then are cut as well. What remains from those 2 cuts then goes to the vice chairman, The vice chairman then selects who of those to interview. The vice chairman can do that alone, or as I believe you planned, Jordan, with a panel.
Correct.
Once the vice chairman selects the candidate that he prefers, that has to be presented to all of you, the membership. By statute, the concurrence is needed for this position. Once he gets that concurrence, the applicant, if he or she is not already in the senior executive service, that person has to be certified by the Office of Personnel Management and also go through a concurrent background check. If the person is already in the SES, then you just have a background check. Once all of that is done, then we can issue, well, the vice chairman issues a final offer. The person is sworn in and can start working. So that in a nutshell is basically how the process goes. The HR contractor at Interior has advised that we wait until after the 4th of July weekend to post the job. That's why we've been waiting for a while. In their experience, past and present experience, when you have a posting during the summer, before the 4th of July weekend, that results in low number of applicants and also difficulties in getting those panels that I mentioned, getting them together. So the plan is to post the job as early as next week. We'll of course let you know when that happens, and we'll ask for you to help us spread the word. Just briefly, thanks for those who responded with lists of people in the SES from whom Jordan can choose for the panels that I mentioned. Those who are selected will be notified in the near future. Lastly, and this is a point I want to make, is I already gave Professor Bronin a heads up that we're going to proceed with the process. And I indicated to her, and she fully understood, that we need to ensure there's no real or perceived influence in the process from people like her who do not yet have a formal role or authority regarding the recruitment. So I ask that you please do not reach out to her to discuss the recruitment, and particularly do not discuss applicants with her. And again, she's aware of this, and she understands. And I think that's it for me. And if you have any questions, just let me know and jump in, because I cannot see all of you.
Yeah. Javier, how long, I mean, I know the good lawyer answer is it depends, but how long roughly do you think it might take for this process to run its course?
If the selected candidate is not in the senior executive service, it would take about 5 to 6 months because of that interim step of OPM certifying the person. And there's some issues we have to solve in that regard. But if the candidate is within the SES, it should take about 4.5 months.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions for Javier? Okay, hearing none. Any questions on my introductory remarks and what I've been working on, spending my time? Okay, if not, then I would like to call on Reed for the acting executive director's report. Reed, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. It's good to see you all, and thank you for that polite applause on my acting status. And I can tell you that I'm looking forward to that position being filled permanently as well. So thank you very much. I just want to say, I think you all know this, but it has been an honor and a pleasure to continue acting in this position and to support you all in the important work we do. So I wanted to just give you all a sort of a quick overview of a number of new staff and interns that we have in place. We're really happy that we have been able to recruit and add some additional staff, and that we've got a great group of interns this summer. I'm sorry that they can't all be on the screen with us here, but I did want to at least give you a little bit of information about a number of folks. First of all, I wanted to say that in May, Vanessa Hanby joined the ACHP as our new liaison to the Department of Veterans Affairs. Vanessa is an archaeologist who worked for the Kentucky Heritage Council, otherwise known as the SHPO, as a transportation cabinet liaison, and she carried out Section 106 reviews there. She's a PhD candidate at the University of Kentucky and has earned a graduate certificate in historic preservation. And Vanessa's career in historic preservation began at the University of Georgia, where she graduated with honors in 2011 with a BA in anthropology. So hopefully one day when we get back in person, you'll be able to say hello, and you'll be able to meet her in person. And let me just also thank VA. I see Michael just came on screen there for their support of this partnership. We very much appreciate that. I'm also very pleased to introduce you to, or at least, give you the names of our incredible group of 2022 interns, summer interns. We have a great write-up of all of the interns in our meeting book. It's under the Preservation Initiatives tab and the Major Activities Update. We pulled together a really nice summary of each intern, where they're from, as well as a photo of them. And so please, if you have a minute, take a look at the meeting book and go through that paper. We've got a really great group, and I just wanted to name them real quickly so you start to understand who's with us and where they're working. First of all, we have Jonathan Angulo. He is a current PhD student in history at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. And he's a part-time intern with our Communications, Education, and Outreach Office. We also have Jordan Bush. She is currently an undergraduate at Salish Kootenai College in Pablo, Montana. She's pursuing a bachelor's degree in tribal historic preservation, and she is an intern in our Office of Native American Affairs. We also have with us Charlotte Heavley. She's completed her first year as a Master of Urban Planning student at the University of Washington, and she's an intern in the Office of Federal Agency Programs. We also have Sienna Hinchelwood, who is a recent graduate of Scripps College in Claremont, California, and she completed a Bachelor of Arts in History and with a Spanish minor, and she's an intern at Communications, Education, and Outreach as well. We also have Emily Stood joining us. She's a rising senior at Kent State University's Honors College in Ohio, and she's an architectural studies major with minors in historic preservation, history, and scenic design. That's so cool, scenic design. I want to know more about that. She is an intern in our Office of Preservation Initiatives. And last but not least, we also have Megan Veach. She's a candidate for a Juris Doctor at the Roger Williams University School of Law in Bristol, Rhode Island. And she's also a student in the Masters of Science program in Historic Preservation. And she's a full-time intern in our Office of General Counsel this summer. So we've got a great group. I think the largest group we've ever had. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank the foundation for their great support of interns. We learn from them. We hope they learn from us. And then we also recruit them later on for positions in many circumstances. So it's a win-win-win-win situation. So thanks again to the foundation. Finally, I also just wanted to briefly report that, like many other federal agencies and all of you working, outside of the federal government, we have, like you all, been navigating the pandemic and slowly developing plans to reopen. We have a phased reopening plan in place and will likely implement it within the next 2 months. So it's likely that by the time we meet again in October, the ACHP will have formally reopened, although in a very phased and careful and cautious way. But I just wanted to let you all know that we are likely to begin the reopening process in the next month or two. And as soon as we've done that, as soon as we've started to gradually ask folks to come back, I will share more information about that plan with you, just so you know who's there and when the doors are open and sort of how things are working. So, Mr. Vice Chairman, that's the end of my report.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Reed? Okay, I just want to take advantage of our scenic design expertise and see if I can get a better background here. So send a note to her, would you please? Thanks. Thanks. Okay, let's move on to the next item on our agenda, the Climate Change and Historic Preservation Task Force. Again, we hit on this briefly just now, but you can't thank, in my business for sure, you can't thank people enough. So let me thank the many members who have volunteered their time to be in this very, very important task force and continue to do so. We have a meeting, as I said, coming up in July on the 21st. Reno, any other things that you might want to say about the content of the session that you led, and any of the issues that might have come up at this point?
Yeah. Sorry. If anybody's had this latest COVID, you know that it just hangs around. It's like, ugh, it reminds me of an ex. But anyway, yes, thank you so much for that, Mr. Vice Chairman. I will keep my comments brief. As you all heard earlier, we did have just great participation discussing impacts, not just from American Indian tribes, but we had some Native Hawaiian traditional practitioners that also joined us and just, and received a wealth of knowledge from all of them. We've not just been working, we had our 2 consultation sessions in March that were nationwide, but we've also been working with the White House Council on Native American Affairs and looking for partner agencies to assist with implementation of the plan. So a few of, and I think you'll find this interesting, a few of the projects that they are working on include ACHP support for the review of the BIA's lower 48 community-led relocation pilot review process. So that's a heck of a thing to say quickly, so I took my time. Inventorying agency climate plans for consideration of sacred sites, historic properties, and traditional knowledge, which we'll talk about later too, and developing template language to advance further consideration of those topics when agency climate plans are revisited. So a lot of work trying to assist the agencies, trying to not take the lead, but just to guide and contribute as much as possible where we see that, there's a need. And then another project was a DOI and EPA launching a tribal science webinar. It's a professional speaker series designed to have tribal professionals and cultural leaders educate federal agencies on selected topics. As you can imagine, when we get to traditional knowledge, that's something that I'm sure a lot of agencies are going to appreciate. So, the plan, alongside the plan, we sent out a summary of listening sessions, and that went out today. So those listening sessions, that we've summarized them and talked about what we've learned, and that got sent out to tribal leadership and preservation partners and 106 contacts. So if you don't have a copy of that, let me know, and I can have Ira send that out. So, and then again, just kind of wanting to highlight on, the overall topic and discussion and feedback that we got being really, broad in its scope and helping us to better identify and understand what cultural resources are to tribes and how they see effects from climate change. I think I would just finish by highlighting 2 things. And one, if you're interested in seeing the plan or the summary, you can find it on ONA's climate change webpage. And again, or you can email Ira. And I would just finish, Mr. Chairman, with a little bit of knowledge as we talked about the impacts of climate change to Native Hawaiians, and specifically the fish ponds were brought up. And so my family in Hawaii, we actually have a traditional fish pond, and it is thousands of years old. So hearing that perspective made me actually call home and ask, what am I missing? And I got an earful. so when I say it's learning, I mean it's learning. When Auntie's schooling you, Auntie is schooling you. I got schooled. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I see Teresa has a question, I think. Comment?
Well, I just wanted to say, we're really excited. We have the first 4 climate professionals on board. Yay!
Yay!
We had a climate professionals program. We're bringing 12 in the first cadre, and the first 4 have cleared security and have been with the department now for a week and a half, and they're all ready to go. And I think one of the special emphasis areas, they're trying to help us implement the department's climate action plan. And of course, we've given we're working on our annual update as CEQ and OMB have told us. But I would like to make that, I would like to make the Native American emphasis special emphasis area for our climate professionals. So maybe I'll talk with, ACHP folks, Reno, you and others, perhaps read about how we can kind of plug into that. So we want them to do the useful projects, and we want them to find out really useful things for the department to take action on. So thank you.
Hey, Teresa, anything I can do to help with you on that, let me know. I've been asked to speak on the subject numerous times. My tribe has actually done a few reports on it, and we're currently collecting data on our coastline to assess the impacts of climate change, and in particular to our abalone population, our kelp beds. So not only do I have you, ACHP staff does, and my tribal staff are considered experts on this subject as well. So as chairman, I can direct them your way. Happy to do it.
Great.
I would love to have a meeting of all these climate professionals with you, Reno, and your whatever folks the Reed and all the other ACHP would like to land. I think they would get a lot out of just hearing the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Reno. Very, very constructive move. Okay. Any other questions? I'd now like to turn to Drew to give a brief summary of what we have accomplished the task force and how we're preparing for our next meeting in July. So Drew, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Basically at the May meeting, basically want to give you a summary of what was discussed. The main thing was to look at a strategy for training and outreach. The committee members, the task force members are very concerned about the notion of not only building capacity of understanding about climate change and historic properties within the within federal agencies, but also, of course, broadly within the public sphere. So the group reviewed an outreach strategy that would involve the ACHP doing webinars on the issue. We've already have done that, and we continue to do that. To try to work with federal agencies on the council that are doing climate change training to see to what extent the ACHP might be able to contribute content that would specifically deal with historic properties. Of course, we have our own Section 106 training courses that we commit to making sure that climate change is part of the case studies and other parts of the 106 training courses. And also the idea was floated, and this idea originally came from Teresa Pullman at DHS, about the idea that we might want to seek a partnership with the Association of Climate Change Officers, ACCO. That organization, key to it is training, and they offer a suite of training courses on cultural resources. So the task force supported this overall strategy, really focused on the idea of using the ACHP's website and its social media to start getting the word out more generally to the general public. And so since the May meeting, we've implemented done a couple things. OPI has worked with the folks in communications, education, and outreach to implement what we're generally calling a climate spotlight social media campaign. Where about every 2 weeks, we will be featuring either some relatively timely piece of information, whether it's a news article or whatever it might happen to be, on climate change and historic properties, or taking some of the previously published guidance and reports on the issue that are particularly good that we have on our website, but kind of pull them off and put them out there on social media to get a spotlight on them. In fact, we've just published today on our social media platforms. We did that with the Secretary of Interior's guidelines for flood adaptation. Again, that was published like a year or two ago, but we were taking it out and putting it out there to spread the word a little bit wider about it. So you'll be seeing, if you follow our social media, any of our social media platforms, you'll be seeing these about every 2 weeks. We've also followed up with both Department of Transportation and Department of Homeland Security about the climate training that they are doing internally for their staff, and begun discussions with them of how we might be able to assist in any way or help partner or provide content or otherwise help integrate discussion of cultural resources and historic properties and climate change in those training courses that they're already working on. And regarding the ACCO idea, I had a conversation with the executive director of ACCO. He's very interested in pursuing this. He was singing DHS's praises, Teresa, in terms of working with you guys. And it looks like it's very promising. We're going to do a little bit more homework and get back in touch with him and pursue this further. But I think there's a really good chance that we may be able to move forward with some kind of partnership with them. Hopefully by the July 21st meeting, we'll have some more to report to the, our goal is to have more to report to the task force on that opportunity. One other thing I would note that in the past, we've often had something to report on America the Beautiful. I don't really have anything to report on the America the Beautiful initiative this time around, other than to say that the next interagency working group meeting is in July, on July 19th. So it's possible that we'll be seeing some more things from that we'll be able to pass on to you. And with that, I would just turn it over to if anyone has any questions, or once any of the members on the committee want to elaborate on anything I just said.
Okay, I think we're all set to go. Great. Thank you, Drew. Thank you very, very much. Very much. And again, thanks to everyone for their participation in this important area. And now we're going to move on to a big issue. There's going to be a lot of individuals jumping in and sharing information, a lot of discussion at two of the committees this week. And that an area that's important for the ACHP, but it's also important for the federal government and the entire preservation community. And I am talking about cultural resource workforce development. Enough people, practitioners in this area to Fap and myself, we can't handle everything. So we're going to need some help. So what do we do about this and how do we approach this? And as I said at the outset, this really has been encouraged, really, and it is obvious as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which has an unprecedented investment in the nation's infrastructure. But unlike some of the investments that we saw, the projects that we saw in the Recovery Act about a decade ago that were shovel ready, and some of the environmental work had been done. In this particular situation, the infrastructure projects that are being funded under the bipartisan law will need a complete environmental review, and that means that Section 106 is included as well. So when you add in then the many projects that are being worked on now and that are being contemplated, coupled with the fact that the federal workforce has seen a reduction in the number of staff who carry out and oversee the environmental reviews in recent years, we are many really challenged to build back these staffing levels, and it's become a real problem, something that we all have to deal with, both not only within the government but outside the government as well. That is why we're spending a lot of time in this business meeting on this issue, as the committees have as well. And we've invited we actually invited two distinguished guests to join us. One of them, Christine Harada, the executive director of FIPC, the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council, at the last minute couldn't make it, but she will be at a future meeting. But we are fortunate to have Sean Patch, the Vice President of Government Relations for the American Cultural Resources Association, who is here. Sean, could you wave your hand so we can all see you and know you're there? Okay, good. Thank you. Great. And we're delighted that you're here. Once Sean has shared his perspectives on this issue, I'm going to call on Jay and Luke to hear about the discussions that went on in the FAP committee and the CEO committees over the last couple of days, and then open the discussion to the members. So as I said, this is a very important topic. So let me now officially introduce Sean Patch to talk about this issue playing out in the private sector as well as the government, and particularly among cultural resource management firms. Please let us know, Sean, how you see it from your perspective and the work that you do. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to enlighten us and to be with us this afternoon.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Mr. Chairman. I have some prepared remarks just to keep me on task and within time. So if you guys will bear with me, I'm happy to take some questions at the end, but this will help me facilitate formulating my thoughts today. So good afternoon. It's a privilege to speak with you today, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. I've been asked to provide a few comments on how ACRA is approaching the current staffing shortage in CRM. My perspective is from the private sector, although I expect many of these themes will sound familiar. I begin with a brief discussion of some of the challenges currently facing the industry. ACRA members work with state and federal agencies to support their compliance with Section 106 of the Ncpa. Over the past 1 to 2 years, we have seen a significant shift to an emphasis on the importance of meeting schedules. That emphasis on schedules and project delivery will only increase as new work emerges from the infrastructure bill. And typically, the default response to increased schedule demand is to hire more staff. However, like many organizations, ACRA members are struggling with labor market challenges and a shortage of qualified candidates. Our normal process for finding and attracting candidates has been disrupted. We can no longer rely on academia to produce the labor force that CRM needs. That's been a long-term trend. That's not finger pointing, but simply a statement of the reality that many universities are scaling back various programs. Many academic positions are not being filled after retirements, and graduates may be seeking employment in other sectors. The platforms where jobs are frequently advertised are full of opportunities at all levels. One simply has to go look at archaeologyfieldwork.com or shufflebums.com and you quickly get a sense for how many job openings there are. Those cover entry-level, early career, mid-career, and highly experienced positions across the entire country, so it's everywhere. We hear regularly from ACRA members that job ads often receive few, if any, responses, and I can speak to that personally to say that at our firm, that's a typical outcome in the last 6 to 8 months, which is challenging, of course. There's intense competition for a small pool of applicants. This applies to state and federal agencies and private firms. In a nutshell, we're all competing for the same very shallow candidate pool, and that creates a lot of intense competition. We see a lot of folks jumping from one job to another, which is not unexpected. It's a job seekers market out there. And with no new staff to fill those vacancies, firms and agencies are obviously left shorthanded. The cost of college, both for undergraduates and those seeking advanced degrees, has increased significantly, and that creates barriers in CRM. Potential candidates are evaluating their career opportunities, and many are likely taking jobs in other fields with better working conditions and higher pay. Earlier this month, ACRA held a listening session with its members focused specifically on the issue of the labor shortage in CRM. There was widespread agreement that all firms are facing the challenges I just highlighted. We also had a robust discussion about potential solutions, including some creative alternatives and thinking outside the box. And I'll turn to those now for the remainder of my remarks. In terms of potential solutions, one approach is to change the working conditions. And again, I'm talking from the private sector, and this largely applies to archaeology, recognizing that CRM is much broader than that. But thinking about archaeology for a moment, much of the work is physically demanding and it requires extensive travel. And although we in the private sector cannot change where the projects are located or how much work is needed for a given project, it is possible for us to implement small steps such as clean and safe hotels or providing weekend lodging, higher rates for meals, and paid travel time. So those are really around the margin, but it can help to attract good people and to make sure that they know that we appreciate the efforts for the working conditions. A second possible solution is higher wages. Again, specifically for archaeology on the entry-level side, those wages have been stagnant for decades. That results in a high burnout rate and people leaving the profession after just a few years. There's a lot of wear and tear on one's body to do that. That creates a retention problem, obviously. One solution that ACRA firms can implement quickly is to increase those wages for those positions. ACRA, as a trade organization, can't set rates, of course. There's laws against that, but individual firms can certainly take that up on their own to try to attract and retain people in those positions. Another area that private firms can do, and this may also apply to state and federal agencies in different ways, is to highlight the benefits of working in a particular area. For a private firm, it might be the pay, it might be the company culture and ethics. It's the opportunity to obviously work on the projects. Many of those are interesting in a variety of ways. They're intellectually stimulating and rewarding. There's an opportunity to conduct some research and present that at professional conferences or in publications. There's also the opportunity to work with tribal nations, not in consultation, obviously. We recognize that's a federal agency responsibility, but actually working with folks from tribal nations on projects in various capacities, as well as working with diverse communities. So that in terms of thinking about how CRM is actually applied, that is one of the benefits from working in the private sector. Another potential solution is to enhance our university outreach. We don't want to wait for job seekers to come to us. We want to go to them and meet them where they are. This includes individual firms within ACRA and ACRA as an organization. And later this year, ACRA will be debuting its University Partnership Program, which seeks to recognize institutions that prepare students well for a career in CRM and work with those that want to adjust their curriculum to better do so. That might include recruitment at career fairs, offering paid internships. I heard Director Nelson mention that at the council. That's great. And then broader recruitment from diverse fields such as geography, history, genealogy, lots of other areas where we can do some outreach beyond simply anthropology or history, historic preservation. Another area, again, thinking about how private sector can step up here is to provide better career opportunities there and well-defined career paths for advancement within the private sector. We can create more permanent positions for those with BA degrees. This will help hopefully with retention and job security and recruitment. And we can also financially support staff who have an interest or have the aptitude to seek an advanced degree. Obviously, this requires an investment and commitment on behalf of a private firm, but that is where industry can step up. That investment in training also may apply to Section 106. Obviously, that's the council purview. We recognize that, but we recognize in the private sector that many of our staff, particularly newer staff or entry-level staff, do not have a firm understanding of Section 106 or even Ncpe for that matter. So there are things that we can do on the private sector side to supplement the training that we get through the council and other parties. One topic that we've discussed is consideration of adjusting or the Secretary of Interior's qualifications. I'm not suggesting that we're doing that today, but it is a topic of discussion. There's not widespread agreement on this issue, but it is something that ACRA firms have been discussing for the past couple of years. We recognize that there are strong opinions on all sides about whether or not the SOI qualifications can or should change. One approach is to consider maybe adding an exception for experience. I'm not taking a position on whether that's good or bad or what that might be, but just recognizing that that might be part of the discussion moving forward. Another area is to look at certification and apprenticeship programs, again, especially for archaeology, although that may apply for other areas as well. I noticed in the council's notes for today that preservation trades is an area where that may be well ingrained. So at least on the archaeology side, that may be viable. It could be an alternative to a BA degree. It could allow us to recruit directly from high school students, possibly even certified through the Register of Professional Archaeologists. How it gets worked out, how to operationalize that, those are obviously up in the air, but private firms could step in and take the lead on that initiative. And I offer as an analog for the council's consideration today is the Veterans Curation Program, which is administered by the United States Army Corps of Engineers. The VCP, for short, has multiple labs around the country that hire veterans from all branches of the military to rehabilitate archaeological collections that are under federal control. In the process, those veterans are also gaining practical skills that lead to jobs for them and/or they pursue college degrees. So thinking about that model and how that might be applied to CRM is worth talking about. And lastly, I'll say, with ACRA specifically, there are a couple of initiatives that we're working on. One is we have an academic collaboration committee that's engaging various universities on solutions to the workforce shortage. This program will eventually include internships and hopefully more than that. And then lastly is diversity. We recognize that CRM has a diversity problem and solving that requires a substantial commitment. We're working on this in a number of ways, including transparency about salaries, giving minority groups the opportunity to engage and connect, and hopefully more than that. So in closing, ACRA firms recognize there are no easy, immediate solutions to the staffing shortage, unfortunately. I'm sure that's everyone here recognizes that as well. And that solutions will require working on multiple fronts and making a long-term investments to ensure a reliable, stable workforce. Because ACRA represents private industry, it's well placed to lead on this issue, and we hope that we can work with the council and other agencies to get that done. I thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you, and I welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
You're on mute, Jordan. Yep. Jordan, you're on mute. Yep.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much. A very illuminating presentation, Sean. Really appreciate that. Very creative. Questions for Sean? I have one. And then maybe we'll hear some others. And this is probably pie in the sky, but I know that a lot of some professions have been determined by the government. Well, now we're talking, you mentioned about the cost of education and loans and things like that. Still paying back some of my kids' loans. This is forefront in my mind. And they'll after a certain amount of time, they excuse those if they have been in a certain profession that has contributed to society, health professions, social work, things like that. Might we try to include this area as one of those professions, or is that just totally, as I said, pie in the sky? What do you think?
Well, it's a great suggestion. I've not heard that yet, and that's something that I certainly has some appeal. Whether or not it can actually be operationalized, that's a different question. Yeah. But in principle, I like the idea a lot, and it's something I will take back to ACRA to mention. And we do have a lobbyist in Washington who helps represent our interests on Capitol Hill, so maybe that's something we could talk about. I appreciate you making that suggestion.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. CAC.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean, I have a question about the veterans program. I think that's a fascinating concept to see if it couldn't go beyond that. Do you have any idea where they've gotten jobs as they've gone through the program? And especially as you've talked about the secretary standards and the qualifications and all of those things, has that been an impediment to them, or is it a way to is that a way that folks have found a way around that issue?
Those are great questions, CAC. I appreciate that. I'll do my best to answer the VCP question. I don't have a handle on all the statistics in terms of the job placement. What I can say is that I believe it's above 90% of the graduates of that program go on to jobs of some sort. That's not all in CRM, of course. They might go into jobs in a range of fields, but the success rate for those folks is very, very high. What I can't say is what percentage of those folks go on to CRM. That's anecdotal at this point, but there have been a number over the last 10 years during the life of that program who have gone either to pursue pursue a bachelor's degree or gone to work in some capacity. So there is that possibility to do that. In terms of the SOI qualifications, I'm reluctant to use the word barrier because I feel like that can be a loaded term, but it can be certainly. Over the past 40 years, or maybe even longer now, since CRM has been a viable field, the SOI qualifications have always been the gold standard in terms of being responsible for the work that gets conducted. But everyone recognizes, and there's lots of anecdotal information about this, there are many people out there who've been practicing for a number of years who through experience are probably as qualified, if not more so, than many people who have the formal training. Again, I don't want to get into the merits of whether it's good or bad or whether or not we should do it, but there's a recognition that there is some of that. So the point here I'll say is that given where we are in terms of the labor market and some of the larger problems we're seeing that are structural, maybe it's time to have that discussion at a broad level, whether or not there is some merit to reconsider those SOI qualifications and what it might look like if there was an alternative. That answer your question?
Yes, I mean, I guess the other question that might be out there is that if a recent college graduate were working underneath someone who did meet those qualifications, would that be sufficient across the board?
It's not sufficient in all cases. It is sufficient in some states. And I believe that I'm not the expert here, so I will defer to someone else, but I understand that there's a difference between SOI qualifications and OPM standards. And for folks who work in the federal government, the OPM standards may have a different set of qualifications, and perhaps Director Nelson could answer that better than me. So there's a disconnect, and there has been for a number of years. What I've heard in ACRA for several years has been trying to bring those OPM standards up to the SOI qualifications. But given, again, where we are today, maybe there's a bigger discussion to be had here.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. Luke.
Yeah, just a quick comment, Jordan, in response to your question. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is a really interesting idea. I never thought about possibly altering that. It's evolved a lot in recent years. I know because I've also been making those payments. And I think it's not based on a choice of profession. It's based on an approved employer, which is determined typically by the tax status of your employer. And I think there's an approved list of employer ID numbers, sort of the tax filing. But it may be that, a way to visit it is to take a look at sort of who's on the list so far as approved employers, and looking at creative ways to expand that list. So I think it's possible you could be in a profession that's typically part of it, but because of where you work, you're not part of the program. So, the devil's probably in the details somewhere.
Great. Thanks, Luke. Thank you very much. That's very, very helpful. Teresa, Dr. Pullman.
Thank you. Well, so I totally agree with you, Sean, about the SOI qualifications and the alignment with OPM. There's also the small matter of there not really being a job classification for cultural resources manager or historic preservationist or other architectural historian, those kinds of things. If this was a recommendation for FIPSI, actually, Jordan, maybe when you and Christine are talking, perhaps she might have the council the FIPSI work with OPM regarding classification, because we're going to need, we in the federal government, in addition to private industry, we're going to need the ability to hire these people. And without a classification series, so see, I have recent experience because I want a climate professional. Is there a climate professional series in the federal government? No. So what we had to do was hybridize the 343 and the 0028, right? Environmental protection specialists. And so it's probably a really long process, but I think if you don't start it, you'll never finish, so that kind of thing. And then, maybe the permitting council, maybe work with the permitting council to have a sort of liaison position within the ACHP to go, back and forth. I don't know if you guys have talked about that or not, but that might be something to consider.
Great. No, I don't believe we have a great idea. And Christine's very easy to work with, as you know, and she encourages creative approaches. So I think that's great. Thank you for those thoughts. Caroline.
Thank you, Jordan. I did just want to, from DOI's perspective, add a comment about the Secretary's professional qualification standards, and let everyone know that they are under revision, and of course, I suppose the answer is actually that they've been under revision for a very long time, but the completion of that revision is on the agenda now. And we're hoping that that's going to come together in the next 12 months or less. But what I also wanted to add is that we are well aware of the disconnect with the OPM standards or classifications. And OPM was approached about that many years back now and was unwilling to, they sympathized, but was really unwilling to tackle the issue and play ball on it. That said, we also have it on our agenda to revisit that issue with OPM, but we're doing this sequentially rather than concurrently, I guess I would say, in that we want to get the standards revised and locked in first. And then once we know what that new standard is and what they say, then restart the conversation with OPM about what the disconnect is and where we might go with it.
We'll stand with you, Caroline.
Love to hear that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you. Excellent. Reno, and then Reed.
Thanks. Caroline, that's awesome to hear, by the way. The Secretary of Interior standards are, there's a comfort level there for tribes as well. And that I don't want somebody that's taking a 2-week course going out and making some kind of determination without tribal input. And I think that the standards, as they are today, at least, ensure that there is a level of that takes place. I would just encourage that if we open up the standards, well, if we continue to open up the standards and we finally apply the Band-Aid, maybe that's the right way to say it, that we look for creative ways that, let's be honest here, archaeology when it comes to Native American tribes doesn't exist without Native American tribes. All the ethnographic work, all the work that was done to talk to us and try and figure it out. And we still have pockets of information that we protect for very good reason. I would just hope that if they open up the standards, they look at ways and saying for like people like myself, right? I mean, I've been a TIPO for more than a decade, but more importantly, I studied, was mentored under one of our traditional leaders in our tribe. And a lot of us in Indian country do that. And the knowledge I have that's specific to my tribe is greater than all of the archaeologists combined in the world. And that is something that I can say, not just as tribal chairman, but as a traditional Kashaya Pomo man. There's plenty of people that like me that are out there. And I would hope that the Secretary of Interior Standards considers that when we look at TIPOs who are working for their own tribes, because it is something that tribal knowledge is, it's not recognized in the way that it should be in the Secretary standards. And this is the time, and I'll probably give her a call and chat with her a little bit about this as well, because now that I know, Carolyn, y'all are working on it. It's something that should be on her radar to say, hey, let's incorporate tribal knowledge, traditional knowledge into those standards.
Yeah, thank you. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. And I would just say regarding your comments, Reno, and we know that many types of really important expertise do not come from colleges and universities, right? So great point. I wanted to just briefly acknowledge in the absence of our other guest speaker, as Vice Chairman Tenenbaum had indicated, we had invited Christine Harada to be with us today to talk about this from a permitting council perspective. And I just wanted to share with you a little bit about the discussion we had at a permitting council meeting not so very long ago. Just a few key points. One is just to be clear that the staff shortages and workforce challenges we are facing are being felt in almost all of the natural and cultural resource environment spheres. There's the same challenge happening with biologists and others that inform NEPA reviews, wildlife biologists, experts, in a whole variety of things. So this is really sort of hitting a broader swath of professions than one might realize. And the good thing, I guess, the important opportunity in front of us is that the awareness of these staff shortages potentially affecting the ability of agencies to advance environmental reviews on, among other things, infrastructure projects has caught the attention of the Office of Personnel Management. And at that last permitting council meeting, we had a representative of OPM join that meeting, and they're already thinking of a whole variety of things from designating interagency teams to adjusting hiring authorities and things like that. So I mention that just simply to say this is a broad issue that's felt across the natural and cultural sort of sciences or resources management spheres. And I think we have an opportunity to get attention at a very high level from OPM. So I just wanted you to think about those connections and the fact that OPM is listening as you form any additional recommendations you might have for us on priorities. Thanks.
Thanks, Reed. Thanks for adding that extra information there. Caroline.
Just a quick follow-up on Reno's remarks. I did want to assure everyone that we will not be moving any revision of the standards forward without addressing the issue of Indigenous knowledge and other traditional knowledge. So it's moving forward a little slower than probably some of us had hoped, but we're doing it purposefully, more slowly and methodically, because moving it forward without that piece is not of much value, because that is a significant gap that's existed for a long time. So it will only move forward with that being addressed this time. So it will be taking us a little bit longer, but it will be coming.
Great. Thank you for that assurance. Thank you, Caroline. Mayor Simison.
Thank you. And, following up on Reed's comments as well, this is a nationwide problem for everything. There's not enough workers in the pipeline to fill all the jobs we've had in the past. So I think that everyone needs to a certain extent, figure out where their biggest needs are and prioritize those needs, because there are not enough people to fill what we need as a country throughout the system. And so there are going to be jobs that are going to go away because we just don't have the people. So in the preservation community, which ones are the most relevant, and put your efforts there would be my advice. Whether they can attract a new generation of workers, or they're just a necessity, the highest necessity within the organization to have the highest skill level. So, thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I see it in my profession as well, not only to hire them, but then to keep them, because there are, the search firms are doing a land office business, attracting, looking for candidates for other organizations, and you have to make sure you stay up on what you can offer your folks so that you keep them. I think that's another issue. But great. Any other? Ramona,
yes.
You there?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And
Sure.
I just wanted to thank my North Carolina colleague, Mr. Patch, for presenting to us this afternoon. A big welcome to him. I just want to also emphasize one other thought that I think is really important in all of this is the public service aspect, at least for both the private sector and the public sector. I think that we all as colleagues and professionals in this multidisciplinary work that we undertake, if we could continue to emphasize the importance of public service to support civil society, and just again, I hate to say it, but the I'm from the government and I'm here to help you has sadly become a joke over the last several decades. But where I'm sitting, I am from the government and I am here to help you. And I mean that very enthusiastically and sincerely. And I think there's a generation of very socially minded students who are coming up through the ranks that I think that is a career path that they would embrace if they understood that that is very much a sincere thought amongst their cohort. So who are already in the working professional league. So just want to throw that out there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned, there were two committees that spent a lot of time on this, and it embraces all of our committees, of course. But I'd now like to turn to Jay, one of those committees, the FAP committee. And Jay, if you could talk a little bit about how you handled the topic and any recommendations that came out of your committee.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and thank you to Sean Patch. He did touch on a number of the different issues that the committee also touched on, so it's very informative. But the Federal Agency Programs Committee had a wide-ranging discussion about cultural resource workshop development, workforce development yesterday. We were in the weeds. We went down a few rabbit holes, which I think really indicates the challenge that is facing our industry right now. And this issue touches federal agencies as well as state, tribal, but offices. It's really, really important. However, the committee did focus on a few central concerns. Federal personnel practices and recruiting can be limiting and difficult to navigate for both agencies and applicants. And I think Teresa indicated that in her comments. More flexibility is needed to help agencies connect with the kinds of skills needed for their cultural resources work. The potential applicants could benefit from better information about how to match their qualifications to federal hiring requirements. Those requirements should be right-sized to the job responsibilities and better tailored to a wide range of disciplinary skills that are used in the federal preservation jobs. Revisions to Secretary of Interior's professional qualification standards and the OPM job classifications could help. Compensation is another stumbling block to recruiting and retaining staff. And the committee noted that the value of paid internships and salaries that compare favorably to the private sector. We saw it in the States. We would have lower salaries than the feds. And once somebody got trained up a little bit, they would go off into a federal agency. And the same is true of federal people, get people trained up and they end up in the private sector. Training was also discussed, and members noted that the potential for the advisory council's training programs to help people in other federal positions transition into doing Section 106 work, as well as introduce students and new professionals to those preservation job roles. Now, for next steps, the committee recommended reaching out to professional organizations and university training programs, such as those as the members of the National Council of Preservation Education, to generate interest in the federal in the field, demystifying the federal employment process, and begin a dialogue about what skills are needed to successfully apply for federal cultural resource positions. One outgrowth of that dialogue could be defining core competencies for federal preservation work, as well as the CEO committee also discussed. Mr. Vice Chair, the committee expressed strong interest in this topic, very strong interest, and I think the advisory council could be of service to those involved in the federal preservation program by identifying specific actions to take in stakeholders I've mentioned.
Great. Thank you, Jay. Yes, it was, and it was a very, very engaging discussion yesterday. I really enjoyed participating and listening to it, as was the discussion, Luke, that you had in the CEO committee, and particularly as they focused on the preparation and the training of potential employees in this area. So if you could share a bit of the flavor of your discussion and some of the things that you talked about, perhaps some things that haven't been mentioned yet to share.
Yeah, I sure can. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I will try to do a mopping up job here, as historians often do. So I'll kind of separate this in kind of key points from the presentation of the topic, and then what followed with the discussion among the committee members. We had a guest speaker get us kicked off, Dr. Rachel Klein, a historian of the Forest Service, who really spoke with multiple hats, both as a trained educator, but also as a federal hiring manager with the Forest Service, who gave us all kinds of ideas to consider, some of which we've already heard, and a few of them had a slightly different twist. She suggested reaching earlier in the pipeline down to high school and college age students to make sure they have key concepts in history and historic preservation, so that by the time they get to careers in historic preservation, we've already got them, kind of so to speak. They're more likely to already be inclined to apply and pursue such careers. She said from her experience, it's important to connect history with a place in the first stage, rather than talking to them right up front with using jargon and details about Section 106. She suggested working with faculty to connect with students, provide them with a list of internships, opportunities, where they can seek practical experience. She also, it hasn't come up yet in our discussion today, she said these students need help navigating the federal hiring system, in particular finding their way through USA Jobs. And she pointed to an example herself, while with over a decade of experience as a historian at the Forest Service, herself sometimes finding it challenging to navigate her way through USA Jobs. And then finally, she talked about making sure that, reaching out to colleges, making sure students have proper electives, college courses that prepare them with real world skills. She gave an example how often educational programs lack the kind of empirical based courses, hands-on learning that's often needed. And then new hires find a disconnect between what they learned within the four walls of the classroom and the skill sets they need out in the real world. And so how do we tackle all these? I mean, it's a complicated, multifaceted situation. And then during discussion, Ann Walker suggested we work with teachers to connect with them through their professional associations. She mentioned students hardly use email anymore. We need YouTube, we need TikTok, we need Twitter, might be better avenues to connect with younger people who may not communicate the way that we communicate. She said another way is through the portals that teachers use themselves to connect with their own students. Jordan suggested perhaps an enhanced public awareness campaign about the ACHP and its work and mission, and utilize our trade associations to get the word out. Of course, as we all recognize, job security and starting salaries are also issues. Chris King indicated we need to reach out directly with directors of graduate programs at universities to help with recruitment. To that, I would also add university career centers and those who really specialize in communicating opportunities with students. Eric Hines suggested a forum with the Ncpe, which Jay mentioned a moment ago. And our Rutgers extern, Natasha, talked about her own experiences as a kind of early career professional in this world, and how she's been able to connect. She looks and felt that other people her age look for opportunities through various websites, job portals that are promoted by her college career center. And so being aware of how these young people find out about us in the first place. And I think that summarizes both the presentation and the discussion.
Great, great. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, thank you. So if you haven't guessed it yet, this is a major priority for this agency and for the field. Sean, I want to thank you again for getting everybody's creative juices flowing. There's some great ideas coming out of here that came out of the committees, but also what people talked about. And I think also particularly appreciated the comment about young people looking for jobs where they really felt fulfilled, and many of the, dealing with social issues and whatnot. I think that's really, really important. I see it too in my area of the Holocaust Museum, that people really want to make a difference, and they want to do things that matter, and that trumps dollars on many occasions. So I now have a number of questions. These were in the meeting book, and I want to throw it open to the members. We've talked about a lot of these issues. We may go quickly through them, but I want to give other folks who might have comments on these areas a chance to wade in. And I think this is important. Anything you can add to this will help the staff prioritize areas to go and prepare a report at the next meeting, and really develop a path forward in this area. So the first question that was in the book was, given the breadth of this topic, how should the ACHP prioritize its response actions? Anyone want to jump in and recommend a priority here? What should we do first? What are the top 3 things that we ought to focus on?
Jordan, this is Jay.
Yeah. Jay, please.
I just want to highlight, and one thing that neither Luke nor myself mentioned too much in our thing is that what federal agencies are saying to us is that they need experienced professionals. So in terms of working through developing a workforce, right now, because of the infrastructure bill and those types of things, the experience is really important. So to be able to identify those people in the field and bring them back, so to speak. So I think that could be a top priority is how do we identify people who've been in the field and get them back in the field?
Okay, great, great. Other thought? Yes, Ramona.
Yes, thank you very much. We had talked about this, I believe, in our federal agencies conversation, but this idea, and Eric Hine and I talked about this after the meeting, is this idea of having some kind of dialogue, delegation, listening sessions with the Ncpe, which is the professional organization working with the various accredited programs in preservation. I think it'd be really great for us to hear what they're thinking and exchange that information. The other thing is, and I'm not by any means an expert in OPM and USA jobs and all of that, I'm just kind of observing from the outside. I think there's a need to right size some of these job descriptions. I don't think you need a PhD. There's not very many PhDs in historic preservation, for example, to draw upon, but I don't think you need a PhD to do 106. It's complex work, but I don't know that it requires that level of education. So
maybe a law degree, but not a PhD.
Maybe a law degree, a different kind of doctorate. But in any case, I think that might help gather in more potential candidates. So
Great.
thanks again, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts, priorities that the staff should focus on? Okay, let's look at the next question that was in the book. It said, how should the ACHP collaborate with federal agencies and partners to identify specific challenges and opportunities surrounding workforce development and recruitment for federal preservation jobs? Collaboration. How might we do that? Well, we've talked a little bit about education, about courses, webinars. That might be a way to collaborate, right? Examples, some of this work. Anne.
Yes, we did talk about this at the committee level, and I echo what Ramona said about the PhD, having interviewed a lot of people over the years for the Colorado SHPO's office. You know, when we had limitations on PhDs or years of experience, it got really, the file got very thin. But what I was going to suggest is to the federal agencies is that they follow the ACHP model with offering internships at various levels. Because the challenge about people entering the workforce or moving up in it is they say, what experience have you had doing this? So if we could encourage our colleagues at the federal agencies to do what the advisory council has done, which is not like one intern. You know, it's multiple interns in in-depth layers so that they have that experience. What I hear from some of the alumni of the Youth Summit program is they'll say, oh, they told me I don't have enough experience. Well, you know, you're 24. I get that. But, you know, they have to have something to get their foot in the door. And they may be immensely talented and qualified and don't quite have the experience yet.
Yeah.
So, promoting more internships.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Kak.
I guess I'm a little challenged by the question because the ACHP is a council of 24 members. So it seems to me that the 24 members really come together to help to figure out how to solve some of these problems. And I mentioned to Reed yesterday that the staff has a lot of great ideas in front of them. They'll only be able to juggle so many balls in the air. It really, I think, goes back to the council members to come together and agree on what they can do as a council, if that makes any sense. And carry forward what I think is the gravitas of the council stepping in to do things rather than just the ACHP staff.
Yeah. Yeah. So great point. Let me just mention that as I've mentioned before, that I teach a course about 4 or 5 times a year on Section 106. There's an introductory and advanced course to DoD students. And I know that they've worked with the council to develop some exercises, some training exercises, which have been very helpful. I wonder, do other agencies have these courses are fairly well attended? My experience is that a lot of the students are facile with the natural environment, but have been given a responsibility to do cultural resources recently and are trying to figure out how to navigate. And I used to find this with the council courses that I taught, that a lot of folks come in there. I always feel we should get some engineers in there too. That would be very helpful. But you'd have folks who would come in kind of a negative approach. And by the time you were done, they were, they saw the light. But I'm curious, do other agencies have 106 courses that they around? This particular course is run out of a group called Seacoast, which is a Navy a group out of Port Hueneme, but just curious. Anybody? Silence is deafening. Okay, I'm thinking probably not. So that might be another thing to do to get folks involved. I teach this with Claudia Nisley, who worked for the council for many years, and to expert, particularly in Native American areas and consultation. Okay, let's look at the third question real quick. How can the ACHP and federal agency partners leverage their existing training and outreach programs to address cultural resources, workforce challenges? I think we sort of have talked about that. And I think we can move on to the last question. What information is needed to prepare members to discuss potential solutions to cultural resource workforce development challenges? Well, anybody want to take any add to that? Again, I think we've talked about some of the things that, maybe some more research into this area never hurts. But Reed, you want to?
Yeah, well, others are forming perhaps their last comments on the topic. I would just acknowledge that, and I think Mayor Simison underscored this, that this is a broad sort of generational issue that many are facing. And we know that the solutions to, particularly to the challenges that those in cultural resource management are facing, are going to have to come from everyone that's involved. I mean, we don't want to pretend here that the ACHP itself can and should and must be the sole voice on how to solve and address this issue. It's going to take partnerships with colleges and universities. It's going to take partnerships with other federal agencies, with ACRA, with the Society for American Archaeology, and all of the other associations that have an interest in this that are training a generation. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, we know that this is a very big issue that's going to take a lot of folks working on it. The other thing that I would say is that, we're always happy to hear your ideas about what specifically the ACHP can and should do, probably principally within the federal family at first, and perhaps expanding beyond that to prioritize things right now that'll help agencies advance their infrastructure projects. This is a very important and long-term discussion, something we need to be talking about for a long time, but we also know that there is an urgent need now to help agencies with solutions. So I guess I'll close by saying, one of the things I think we will do at a staff level is to take all of this feedback and then perhaps come up with some priorities we can pursue at the staff level. And I'm guessing a whole host of recommendations of what others might pursue as well. We can't take it all on, but we can certainly try to identify the issues and maybe suggest to others what they might do to help out as well.
Great. Thank you, Reed. Thank you. Reno. Hello, Reno. I think he just.
There we go. Gosh, one last button. No, I just, I want to point out that when we talk about cultural resource management, this obviously tribes have been doing this for a very long time with a limited amount of success since other people came here, including other tribes. If you ever ask the folks in the Minnesota, all the Dakotas and Lakotas and the Oneidas, that Ho-Chunks that didn't get along very well either. So it's not like it's everyone else. But I do want to point out that, with 209 TIPOs, we're very much a part of cultural resource management and the workforce. And when we consider problems and solutions, that we also consider the issues that tribes have in contracting with federal agencies. So if, with some of the recovery work that happens, there are millions of dollars at stake, and hundreds, if not thousands of sacred sites and sites up and down, both on and off trust land. All you need to do is look in the New York Times and their reporting of the fires in New Mexico and Arizona this year, and the number of sites that were inadvertently, as they say, found, but obviously tribal folks knew they were there. So just when we talk about workforce, we look at the barriers to tribes to have a larger impact in the field of cultural resource management when it comes to workforce development, recruitment, retention in Indian country, of wanting to have CRM professionals come and work for us. But again, I'll go back to federal agencies throwing up barriers to us in contracting. So something to consider, I think, Jordan, when we talk about workforce development and issues and problems.
Yeah, great, great. Thank you, Reno. Don't go away. Keep those buttons open because I'm about to call on you. For those of you following along in your agenda, we are about to hit number 5, or Native American Affairs. And I thought that the discussion that you had at your meeting, Reno, about traditional knowledge and Section 106 reviews and the whole idea of publishing a statement on the importance of that was fascinating, was really important. Let's share the knowledge with the committee knowledge with our membership, and tell us a little bit about what happened there and what your thoughts were about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as always, I like to lead off with a thank you to you, Vice Chairman, I almost called you Colonel Vice Chairman, for joining us for that meeting. Again, your presence is always appreciated, as is Reed and the rest of our staff, and Ira and the crew who do such a good job preparing not just me, but preparing all of you and setting the table for these meetings. So at the Native American Affairs Committee meeting that we had, we did have a really good discussion on traditional knowledge, and and we've been talking about it. It's come up, I don't even know how many times. I think we're going to play a little game that every time the word traditional knowledge is said, then you have to do the like button or something, because it'll be fun to track how many times we say that during these meetings. But it's good, and it's important that we do. We've been talking about doing a policy statement on traditional knowledge in the 106 process. Really, as the administration is pushing it, and here's some other terms, but what we settle on, or what the administration settles on calling it, will be what it does. But it's traditional knowledge for us for now. We've been working on it for years. Different versions of this. We did an informational paper in 2021, very, very, very well received. Not just, I think, by agencies and tribes, but by our little agency as well. And I think that what we've learned from that is that we need more. More of a policy statement, more of something, now that we've got, primed you all with information, let's push a policy statement that helps us to better understand. So, we have been looking at and collaborated with with UNDRIP, or with the United States Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues to host a side event. And we're working with the White House Council on Native American Affairs to develop federal-wide guidance. So, really should, having ACHP should be a huge part of that. And our connection with tribal leadership and traditional practitioners is something that is, there's a uniqueness there for us. To name a few, but here are some of the reasons. I think we all know, but always want to remind folks, why are we doing this? Traditional knowledge is not consistently or effectively been integrated into the 106 process. It can be, there's mentions, but we're looking to go deeper and a more meaningful inclusion of TK into it. A member approved policy sets clear expectations for ACHP staff and probably, some federal staff as well, that non-ACHP federal staff. So, the current administration has been clear that TK is a valid form of information and part of the best available tribal science. The ACHP's traditional knowledge information paper was only the first step. It was always meant to be a first step, kind of baiting the hook, so to speak, and I really need to go fishing. Since May, we have worked to develop a draft outline of a policy statement along with a consultation outreach plan, and a timeline. So that was shared in the committee, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and gave folks an opportunity to comment there, or send, if they have some concerns, to just email us as soon as they get an opportunity to, or we're always available to talk on the phone. We did have good communication with our members and our committee, and there was a support of the development of this policy statement, and wanted it to be broad and inclusive, and that's what we'll do. So ONA staff will be sharing resources with members in the coming weeks. Y'all can look forward to that, including an outline of the policy, the proposed outreach and consultation plan that was already shared, and we're happy to share it with you if you'd like it. and a potential timeline for development. And again, we're happy to share that with you all if you haven't gotten a chance to check it out yet. And then development of the policy will include collaboration with Indian tribes and Native Hawaiians, the Fap Committee. And I want you to know that Reed said that I have to refer to it like Ohio State as the Fap Committee. So there you have it. Federal agencies, TIPOs, SHPOs, random cool Indians like myself. And, and so I think that kind of summarizes that. I'm happy to answer any questions, or put it in the chat, and Ira is monitoring the chat as well and can answer any questions that you might have, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Reno? Okay, Jay, you want to report on FAP's consideration of the statement? And I know that there was some of that. You guys looked at it as well. Anything you want to add to the?
Yes, we had a great conversation about it. The Federal Agency Programs Committee heard from Ira Matt, who is director of the Office of Native American Affairs, about the timeline for this effort and what a policy statement could accomplish for the Advisory Council in relationship to forthcoming federal-wide agency guidance on traditional knowledge. We decided that both the Native American Affairs Committee and the Federal Agency Program Committee cannot work in silos on this particular topic, and the committee looks forward to collaborating closely with the Native American Affairs Committee on framing how traditional knowledge should be integrated into the Section 106 review process. Thank you.
Great. So let me sum up this part of our Native American Affairs report just by saying that every meeting that I attend, it is clear to me that the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation is seen as a leader in discussing these kinds of issues, a leader in lobbying for more consultation, for timely consultation, and I am proud to be able to walk into these, to virtually walk into these sessions and maintain that stance. I think that is so important, and I think it reflects very favorably on this agency. So just want to add that. Let me just a little intermission. For those of you, I realize not everybody lives in DC, but for those of you living in DC, you may or may not know that at the Kennedy Center from Thursday through Saturday, there will be a presentation for those 3 days, something called We the Peoples Before. And it joined First Peoples Fund and the Kennedy Center in honoring Native cultures, sovereignty, history, and vitality with 3 days of performances, demonstrations, and discussions. I don't know that that it's streaming. It might be, I can't tell right now. But those of you who just wanted to let you know, because I know a lot of the folks do live in this area, you might want to check it out, and it's free. So let's move on now to a discussion about updating the council's policy statement on burial sites, human remains, and funerary objects. This is an important statement for us. We've had one. We put one together 15 years ago, but it's time, I think, to revise that, and certainly to look into revisions and move forward. And Rena, we're going to up your salary for this because we've called on you a lot. So I think it's only fair. A portion of what the acting chairman gets, Reno, for sure. So go for it. If you can share with us, it's just a summary of what of that discussion on that particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. And I just noticed that my brother Rick is here, and Rick, guys, it's the prayers for you and your pops, bro. I hope everything's good, man. And you're on my mind, just so you know, brother. And sorry, folks, but some things we need to say, because I think that the fact that we're not all together, we're not all seeing each other, we forget that at the end of the day, we're a preservation family here together. And all of us care about each other. We all care about what happens. We enjoy cracking jokes about each other. I used to really love teasing John Fowler, and I can't tease Reed the same way. I haven't really found that niche yet, but I think John and I will work together and find a good way to do it. But I do want to put that in there for all of you, as well as stating that I was very disappointed in Javier's background in his house. I figured it would be all law books, and instead it was like plants and other fun stuff. So Javier, step up your game. With that being said, onto a much more serious matter. I have to apologize to any of the Indian folks that are on the call, and to Reed, that I have to discuss this because Reed is married to an American Indian woman. And so anytime I discuss human remains, as chairman of the tribe, my tribe, this is one of the things that I have to do is apologize in advance. So, if anybody later is listening to this as well and inadvertently discuss your tribe's human remains, please forgive me. So we developed a policy statement that's not bad. It's, it isn't great. It isn't bad. It'll keep you floating, but you're not going to put too many people on that particular raft. And with all policy statements, as our understanding of the subject matter gains and the voices come to the table, it's time to take a review and possibly update. And that is the case here. In particular, this policy greatly benefit for a more direct conversation pertaining to American Indian tribes, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians as well. The intent of the original burial policy targeted all people, and that will not change in proposed updates. The reality is that Native American, Native Hawaiian burials are impacted at a greater rate than other groups, which obviously should make complete sense. And one of the big things that would be different, Mr. Vice Chairman and Council, is the inclusion of the boarding school initiative and Native American boarding school groups that are working on how we consider and how we create a policy statement that is reflective of the thousands of Indian children that are buried at these boarding schools, and they run the gauntlet from, everybody wants to say the Catholics ran them all, but I think all of us, knowing and understanding history, realize that is not just them. It's the Quakers and a number of religious groups, and not always religious groups as well. And trying to find those individuals and where they're at, and look for ways to bring those children home to their parents and reunite them in the places that they were meant to be. That's something that certainly should have, at the very least, a statement of policy and how we can collaborate and work to effectively assist in that happening. So overall, committee, we had a good discussion, talked about interacting more with Indian tribes, Native Hawaiians, African Americans as well, wanting to make sure that the historic African American cemeteries are included. And if you all remember, one of my predecessors as the Native American member of the Advisory Council was a chairman of a tribe in Oklahoma, where they actually found and I apologize for having to say this, but for a slave cemetery that had long been abandoned and forgotten, and they found that on their trust land, on their reservation, and preserved and protected it. How great would it be that there were policy statements that assisted and facilitated that process, not just for agencies, but for tribes as well. So, the advance the federal boarding school was something that we all agreed on. Access, the removal and return, address the removal and return of ancestors and funerary objects and items, sacred items related to those cemeteries. Reinforce the ACHP position that burials should only be impacted as a last resort. My opinion, should never be impacted. Maintain consistency with NAGPRA's proposed rulemaking, and that was some of the things that we needed to make sure there was a synergy there between the two of us. Further support traditional knowledge and the expertise of tribes, Native Hawaiians, the identification, documentation, treatment of burial sites, human remains, and funerary items. Where my great grandfather, ×9, is buried in Hawaii is actually a national park, the Honaunau Bay. And I actually have two grandfathers that are buried there. And so seeing how national parks operates that park and maintains confidentiality where needed, but threads the needle of no confidentiality here, stay the heck out, just stay out. They do a really good job. And I think that we stand to learn a lot from our partners in National Park Service on how to negotiate these protections for cemeteries and recognizing it based on traditional knowledge and incorporating that traditional aspect. I think National Park Service is doing a great job. So if you're from the National Park Service, I'll send you a pine cone to say thank you. So similar to the policy and traditional knowledge, development of this policy will include collaboration with Indian tribes, Native Hawaiians, the ACHP committees, federal agencies, TIPOs, SHPOs, and ONO staff will be sharing resources with members in the coming weeks. So y'all can expect to see that, including an outline of policy, just like you saw us do with traditional knowledge. We think that is a good path forward for providing you all with information that you need to help us develop the most inclusive and respectful policy that policy statement, a revision, of the policy statement that you all can share with your agency staff as well. So, Mr. Vice Chairman, that's what I have to report out to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other reports at all, Reno, that you want to share?
No, just as always, I know this is my last chance to talk on this. Hopefully, maybe not. Anything can happen. Hey, Jordan, you're doing a hell of a job. So I know you have a regular job. You're like me. You're a colonel. I'm a chairman. We're both on the same chess match as Keens. And I just want to thank you for always finding time for tribes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. We appreciate you.
It's a pleasure and a passion. So thank you very much. Thank you. Actually, I'm just a telephone colonel, a light colonel, as we say in the military, lieutenant colonel, but that's okay. Promote me. I'll take it.
There you go.
I'll take it. Okay. So now we're turning to the Section 106 part of your agenda. And here we are favored to have the team of Jay and Jamie, to enlighten us. Jay, your meeting again on this topic was terrific. Excellent ideas, excellent thoughts. And Jamie, very impressed by the work that you and your team are doing in consulting the states and working with Indian tribes and Native Hawaiian organizations, other preservation partners, as you continue to craft an exemption for electric vehicle supply equipment. This is a work in progress, gang, a work in progress, but I'm encouraged by a lot of what I heard. And I think at the end of the day, we will certainly come to meeting the minds. And I think it'll be very constructive. And the important point is that we're listening to a variety of different thoughts and ideas. And from that will come, I believe, an agreement that we all can be proud of and work with for sure. So Jay, you want to update the members at this point a little bit in that discussion?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. This is a program alternative, and it's one of the ones that's called an exemption. And Jamie Loishner explained to the committee yesterday how the comments received in the recent consultation efforts were being integrated into the draft exemption. And the staff's plans for a second round of consultation opportunities based on these revisions. So we're not done. More detail on the consultation efforts is also included in your meeting books. And it's really good information. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please do so. I would like to ask Jamie to speak about some of those specifics and how members will be engaged once the exemption is ready for the advisory council's consideration. So Jamie, please.
Sure, and great to be with you all here today. I'm going to try sharing my screen. I know this failed yesterday, but we'll see how it goes today. Maybe we might be able to make it work, but I just wanted to, it's sometimes so much easier to see pictures of some of what we're talking about. I know it's been very helpful for me. So hopefully you all can see the screen now, because I've lost the ability to see you. But just a reminder of, what is it that we're even talking about? We're talking about the electrical hardware and equipment that's used to supply electric energy to a plug-in electric vehicle. There's 3 different levels of EVSE, as I've learned over the last couple of months, levels 1, 2, and then what we're calling 3 in the exemption, but it's also known more commonly as direct current or fast charge. Level 1 is the smallest. It's what you see in somebody's home garage most of the time. Somebody's just topping off their electric vehicle at home or in other smaller workplaces. Level 2 is what you start to see in more public places. It can be wall mounted or pole mounted. It can be freestanding as well. This picture I liked because you kind of get a sense of the scale, as it relates to a gentleman's height, or, in that picture on the right, seeing what it looks like with bollards next to it, in this instance, roughly the same height, roughly the same width. Level 2 can vary quite a bit though, and how big it can be or how small. Again, on the left, you see it can be be a fairly small portable thing. On the right, you see it almost looking like a parking meter. Often, again, found in parking structures or parking garages. The draft exemption, as it's currently worded, does require co-location on existing electric infrastructure and on or within existing parking structures. I think we've defined that, but I'll fill you in on how we might need to define that a little bit further. In consultation meetings that wrapped up just a couple weeks ago, the one that seemed to cause the most concern was this level 3, the direct current or fast charge. Mostly because of the size of it and the amount of electrical infrastructure that's needed to support it. So the photo on the right gives you a little bit of a sense of what that scale can look like. It looks pretty similar to, a gas station. And on this screen, you see how it can kind of fit into an existing streetscape or mimic, existing bus station stops and, fit in with that existing signage. One thing to note on the DC fast charge though too is that the technology is constantly evolving. We've seen, I think all of us in our heads have seen what the big ones look like. They seem to be getting smaller and smaller by the day. So, you can end up with parking lots like what you see here or parking structures like you see here, where you can actually have many of them all in one area. The one thing or the 2 that really are not subject to the proposed exemption though are those electric vehicle supply equipment that would use canopies or photovoltaic arrays, solar arrays. So those would not be covered by the exemption. So hopefully I'll stop screen sharing now. Cancel. Hopefully that all worked. But we just wanted everybody to kind of get a sense of what we had been using and what we had been visualizing and drafting that exemption. As we discussed in the Fap Committee meeting yesterday, there were a number of comments that were received. 23 by last count were written. Obviously, we took comments during those consultation meetings as well. We are putting together a response to comments document right now. I'm actually planning on working on it after this meeting wraps up to get that out for some internal review. But the comments seem to fall into 2 categories. What I like to think of as administrative, so requests for or questions about how will agencies report out on this, and what about if you discover things as a project is being implemented. There were a lot of requests for clearer definitions. Definitely understand that. Definitely have seen a few areas where we can tighten those up. In some cases, requests for more definitions. Also a big fan of that. And also, the need to somewhat explain, maybe not in the exemption itself, although there's a few areas I think we can include it, but how this might coordinate with other local or state reviews. So again, that's kind of the administrative side of things. On the substantive side of things, there were a lot of comments or questions about using qualified professionals, requests for, is there a way to put out a number as to, how deep can you go, how long can you go, how high can you go, maximum dimensions for some of this equipment. And then of course, design guidance was requested quite a bit. So sorting through those, I'm definitely going to be relying on subject matter experts as speaking of workforce development earlier, this is not an area I'm an expert in. I am learning as I'm going. So I expect that what we'll be doing next is revising it as best we can in coordination with some subject matter experts, putting together that detailed response to comments document, and then going out for a second round of consultation with that revised exemption and the response to comments document, and hosting another series of meetings to discuss that. And fingers crossed we get it right on the next one and can hopefully submit a final version of that exemption to the members. Late August, early September is my new goal after having to revise the old one. So in the meantime, we do continue to monitor the program alternatives inbox, which was set up specifically for this effort. So we're still answering any questions that come in. To be honest, we're still taking any comments that come in, and hopefully we can hear a little bit more from the members today about any questions they have or concerns that they may have ahead of this coming to you all. For that 30-day review period that's required by the regulations. Of course, during that 30-day review period, we would also be scheduling members meetings to discuss, thoughts, observations, and sufficiency of the documentation that you receive. So I think that covers all of my notes, Mr. Vogt.
Thank you very much, Jamie, and thank you for your you and your team for your work on this. It goes to show that our business is changing with all these specialty new areas that we have to be looking into, and so it's really important. And if you haven't again looked at people haven't looked at the member book for the meeting, please do so, because it talks about what this does cover and what it doesn't cover. And I want to remind members, as Reed reminded our committee, that this exemption does not attempt to cover the full range of EVSE charging equipment, but rather the subset of that consultation effort is helping to make better a definition of what we need to do. Members will receive more detailed information and be invited to participate in that video conference that Jamie talked about once the exemption is ready for the Advisory Council action. And I look forward to continuing this conversation then. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jamie. Questions for either Jay or Jamie, Jay and Jay? Anyone want to share any thoughts now that it's a good time as they prepare for the next round? Going once, going twice?
Well, let me just butt in here one last thing.
Yes.
I thought
Okay.
the photos that you provided, Jamie, really were instructive in giving a good sense of what we're looking at in terms of this equipment.
Well, thank you. And again, I'm sorry. Yesterday was a bust technology-wise. I guess that's one of the challenges of working from home and limited bandwidth at times, but thank you.
Thank you. I see Richard.
No, thanks. I mean, I'll take this opportunity to segue onto two issues. First of all, Jamie, thanks for this. I mean, this is extremely important to the Department of Defense. We have 180,000 non-tactical vehicles. We have a requirement to electrify that entire fleet by 2030. All right, so we can do some math about charging infrastructure. Then you can do some math about the number of historic properties that we manage, which is extremely large and growing. So your work here is extremely important to the Department of Defense, because we are sort of planning to move pretty much in stride with deployment of charging infrastructure, and this work is important to us. And obviously, we're not going to put one of these things on the planes at West Point or something like that, but we will, of course, we're going to need to deploy them. So so thanks for your work here, and we're watching this very closely. On the topic of a large portfolio of historic properties, I would just say I think that many of you are aware that the Army, on behalf of the Department of Defense, is working a program comment for Vietnam era housing. This is extremely important to the department. We think it is, the most appropriate, most cost-effective, and most beneficial approach to managing what is a large and growing portfolio. So that for this case, this is 7,500 plus buildings for the Army. This was historical, or this Vietnam era housing. I mean, if you can imagine homes built in the late 60s and 70s, there's not a lot of architectural interest in the vast majority of these homes, simply built with pretty minimal construction. So I think the Army has a good plan forward that will preserve a historic record, that will make information available to all parties, which will set aside some of the homes which have a historical context, famous people that have lived in there, actions that have taken place. But we simply have to manage these properties. We have to maintain them. We have to modify them. We have to update them and do these general managerial activities. And we can't do it on a project by project basis. And if you look to the future, you look at all of the historic properties in the Department of Defense, we have over 200,000 total buildings, depending on how you count, vast majority of which will be above past the 50-year mark very soon. So for the houses, we've got to make sure that we have a relatively straightforward way. Program Common is the way to do that. And then we'll take our key professionals, which we learned earlier are in such short supply, and allow them to focus their time and energy on those really significant, unique singular properties, which we also have a lot of. So I just want to raise that to the group's attention, how important this is to the department. I don't want to hijack the agenda, but I know many of you have seen our paperwork. If anyone has any questions, either myself or Dr. Guldenzoff are here, we'll do our best to answer your questions, or we can look for a time elsewhere. But again, I just want to put the marker down, A, how important charging infrastructure is for us, and B, how important that program Common is for Vietnam era housing. Thanks.
Terrific, Richard. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. And for going into the program comment as well. Much appreciated. Jay, do you want to talk about the GSA program exemption for maintenance too?
Well, thank you. We were going to mention the program comment for the Army for the Vietnam War era housing. That program comment is in process. It's another program alternative that the committee looked at yesterday, and it is a program comment. And I'm going to be turning over the conversation to Chris Keppel in just a second to give us a little bit more detail. But we expect to see that program comment submitted by August. Now, the staff also wants to assure that the members will also be provided with the advisory council staff's assessment of the program at that time. So we can expect more detailed information about that. And then lastly here for me, before I turn it over to Chris, we also heard from GSA's effort to develop an exemption for the agency's routine maintenance and preservation activities, and invitations to consultation opportunities for this exemption will be sent out soon and will include further details about the exemption, including an appendix of proposed activities to be subject to the exemption, and a list of the historic buildings GSA owns or manages where it could apply. So they can provide us a lot of good information. This program alternative is being developed through close cooperation between the GSA and the Advisory Council. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the real expert here, Chris Keppel.
Hi, thank you so much. And just a few points in addition to the introduction provided by Jay. So the consultation for the Army PC for Vietnam era family housing began in January 2022. And these were topic-specific consultation meetings, and briefings were provided, and comments have been taken. And these monthly meetings have closed as of June 22nd, 2022. The Army has concluded its 8-month public participation process, and a number of interested parties involved in these consultation meetings include 10 TIPOs, 13 SHPOs, 4 NGOs, the Advisory Council, of course, totaling 47 individuals. And during this 8-month public participation time period and consultation period, so the Army received comments, views, there were discussions, and all of these together all these together were considered by the Army and actually implemented a number of actions and to inform and update the draft program comment. So, it's important that this consultation is ongoing, and those comments were really seriously considered. The Army is now moving into the next phase, preparation and submission of the program comment to the advisory council. Expects to submit the program comment in August for advisory council action. Moving now to the GSA. The GSA is pursuing an exempted category, which we have, another one out there for the electric vehicles. So this is an entirely separate one, and this is for routine maintenance and preservation activities performed on historic buildings that are in GSA's custody and control nationwide. The proposed exemption includes an appendices of exempted activities developed in collaboration with the advisory council and based on routine maintenance exemptions. These are what we would think of as no-brainers in the sense that there really is just a small potential for any of these actions to have any impact to an historic property. Now, the GSA exemption is predicated on the agency's preservation infrastructure, policy, personnel, and practices. Another way of saying that is of all the federal agencies, and I hope I'm not hitting anyone by saying this, but GSA has a really robust and historically long-term historic preservation program and infrastructure and capacity. And so this exemption really is connected to that program and as a requirement. So we'll be sending out invitations along with GSA together on behalf of the GSA to SHPOs and to tribal nations in just the next week. There'll be 2 meetings hosted by GSA on advisory council tech. So we'll be using our web links, our Zoom links. And these invitations are going to include a draft of the exemption text, and I mean really drafty, because we want to make sure this is pre-decisional, and we want to make sure that comments can be addressed and incorporate the shape and the form of this exemption, of course, as well as appendices of the exempted activities, as well as a lot of historic buildings that are currently owned and managed by GSA. So the entire population of historic properties that could be impacted and part of this program, this exemption, will be included for consulting parties to take a look at. And of course, advisory council, ACHP council members will also be sent a copy of these invitations and related content for their information. So with that information, I pass unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Chris. We'll turn it back over to you, Jordan.
Okay, so that, any other reports, Jay, before we move on to a different?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize for my voice. I don't know what's wrong with it. Nobody else does either. So I'm sorry if this is difficult for you to hear. But one last thing, the committee was pleased to meet Charlotte Heavily. She's the summer intern for the Office of Federal Agency Programs, who is researching examples of successful Section 106 agreement stipulations. And we also heard updates on the Section 106 training program, which is preparing a new and improved platform for the e-learning portal and offering Section 106 training opportunities for summer interns and students participating in preservation and practice and cultural heritage in the forest programs this summer. So a lot of stuff is going on, and I really appreciate all the efforts of the staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Great reports, terrific reports. Thanks so much. Now let's turn to the work of the Preservation Initiatives Committee and Rick Gonzalez. Rick, if you could bring us up to date on some of the bills that are under consideration by Congress that relate to our work, that would be terrific. And your discussion, enjoyed your discussion, the discussion in your committee as well, definitely.
Thank you, Jordan, and hello, everybody. We had a pretty good committee discussion on Monday afternoon. We considered 3 legislative issues, and we'd like to offer motions regarding ACHP action. Further information and the text of the motions were provided in the meeting book. And of course, Drew, as always, will post the text of each motion in the chat. So, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to go forward with motion number one?
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Motion number one, behind door number one. Move that the ACHP supports an increase in Historic Preservation Fund appropriations in fiscal year 2023 to at least the 200 million. We did discuss 300, but the 200 million proposed by preservation advocates, recommends that funding for the TIPOs to be commensurate with their growth in numbers, and directs the chairman to so advise the Congress. That's the motion.
Do we have a second?
Second, vote.
Second.
Great. And this is going to be a roll call, right, Shayla?
Yes.
Okay.
Are we ready for that?
We are ready. Yes.
Okay, great. You're voting on the first motion. John Finley,
In favor.
Rick Gonzalez,
Yes.
Christopher King,
Yes.
Luke Nichter,
Yes.
Jay Vogt,
Aye.
Reno Franklin,
Aye.
Robert Simison,
Aye.
Brett Blanton,
Abstain.
Caroline Henry,
Abstain.
Richard Kidd,
I would vote in favor, and just a footnote, the Department of Defense sent a report to Congress recently on historic preservation, and in that report, quote, an equitable and direct way to improve and expedite the Section 106 process, that was in reference to increased funding. So the Department of Defense is on record in our communications with Congress and in favor of the motion.
thank you. Teresa Pullman,
Now I'm going to have to abstain on that one. Thanks.
Colleen Vaughn,
Abstain.
Michael Brennan,
Abstain.
Beth Savage,
Abstain.
Paul Edmondson,
Aye.
Ramona Bartos,
Yes.
Valerie Grusing,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Tannenbaum,
Aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman, that motion passes with 12 ayes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Rick, the next bill?
Yes, thank you. The second motion, move that the ACHP supports the Japanese American World War II History Network Act, House Rule 6434, and directs the chairman to so advise the Congress. That's the
Okay.
motion.
Right. Do we have a second?
I second John Finley.
Thank you, John.
Okay, we will take a roll call on the second motion. We'll start at the other end of the list here. Valerie Grusing,
Yes.
Ramona Bartos,
Yes.
Paul Edmondson,
Aye.
Beth Savage,
Abstain.
Michael Brennan,
Abstain.
Colleen Vaughn,
Abstain.
Teresa Pullman,
Abstain.
Richard Kidd,
Yes, the Department of Defense is in favor of this motion.
thank you. Caroline Henry,
Aye.
Brett Blanton,
Abstain.
Mayor Simison, Robert Simison. We'll come back to you. Chairman Franklin,
Sorry. Aye.
Jay Vogt,
Aye.
Luke Nichter,
Yes.
Christopher King,
Yes.
Rick Gonzalez,
Yes.
John Finley,
Yes.
Mayor Simison. He still on mute. Okay. And Vice Chairman Tannenbaum.
Aye.
Okay, one moment. Okay, Mr. Vice Chairman, that motion passes with 12 ayes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And Rick, Chairman Rick, it's the third bill. If you can set that up.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan. So our final motion number 3 moved that the ACHP supports the African American Burial Grounds Preservation Acts, Senate 3667 and House 6805, and directs the chairman to so advise the Congress.
Chairman, I will go ahead and make the motion for that. This is Reno.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right. And Sheila, if you could do it from the middle this time, maybe. Just kidding. Sorry.
No, making me work here. Okay, how about let me start from the top. John Finley,
In favor.
Rick Gonzalez,
Absolutely, yes.
Christopher King,
Yes.
Luke Nichter,
Yes.
Jay Vogt,
Aye.
Reno Franklin,
Aye.
Mayor Simison, Brett Blanton,
Abstain.
Caroline Henry,
Aye.
Richard Kidd,
Yes.
Teresa Pullman,
Abstain.
Colleen Vaughn,
Abstain.
Michael Brennan,
Abstain.
Beth Savage, Paul Edmondson,
Aye.
Ramona Bartos,
Yes.
Valerie Grusing,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Tannenbaum.
Aye.
Okay, one moment. And Mr. Vice Chairman, that motion passes with 12 ayes.
Great. Great. Thank you so much, Recorder. Do we have any other reports, Rick, that the committee wants to make? Want to share?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have several.
Good.
I'll try to go through them quickly. First, at our meeting on Monday, we discussed housing. The PI committee discussed the White House's recently released Housing Supply Action Plan. We were pleased to be joined by Sarah Brundash, a senior advisor for housing and infrastructure for the Secretary of HUD. There was an excellent exchange of ideas about the untapped potential for rehabilitation of historic buildings to help address the housing shortage and possible opportunities for HUD to promote rehabilitation projects. Mr. Chairman, I think at the end of the meeting, we almost had a new historic preservationist here on board with Susan. So I think she got the bug. So we're fingers crossed. We're hoping that happened on Monday afternoon.
Love to hear that. Thank you. Thank you.
Also, ACHP staff will be following up with Mrs. Brundage to discuss the possible next steps and fulfill her requests for recent studies and case examples regarding historic buildings and affordable housing. We really piqued her curiosity. She also encouraged individual members of the committee to feel free to contact her to explore the issues. So I think it went very well. You were there, so I hope it does continue.
Yep.
On another subject, we also discussed the hard rock mining reform. The ACHP is a member of an interagency working group led by the Department of the Interior that is looking at possible reforms for hard rock mining laws and regulations. One idea under discussion is requiring for the first time, and it's about money, right? Payment of royalties to the federal government for mining on federal lands. The PI committee also considered the idea of a portion of any new hard rock mining royalties being allocated to the Historic Preservation Fund. Had a lot of discussion back and forth on that, but again, It's a new source of revenue. So at the end, I think we said, yes, let's pursue.
Yep.
Current funding of the HPF, as you know, is from offshore oil and gas lease revenues, which are kind of down these days, right? And may not be sustainable in the long term. Hard rock mining royalties might provide an additional revenue stream. The committee discussed the pros and cons, but did not reach consensus on the merits of the idea. I think basically it was a discussion sort of like, they're going to go ahead and do it anyway. I think you mentioned that, Jordan.
Yeah.
Might as well go for the money, right? So
Yeah.
thank you for encouraging the committee to pursue that. And then the last item that we had was the interagency working group will be holding listening sessions for our SHPOs and TIPOs in the coming months, which provides an opportunity to further explore the issue. Participants could be asked for their views on how royalties potentially could assist in the preservation of cultural resources, either through the HPF or in other ways. ACH staff will continue to explore this option with the working group.
Great. Any comments, questions? Lively discussion for sure, Mr. Chairman, at your meeting. I thought interesting discussion about the offshore oil leasing as it related to reputational issues and
Yes,
environment.
I have one question on that, and I apologize. I wasn't at that meeting, but there was a sentence in the materials which said, some argue that the impact of fossil fuel use on climate change is simply too damaging to continue supporting the current funding arrangement. But if I understand what you just said, the bottom line is you're going to reject that view. Which I agree with. I think it would be needlessly destructive to historic preservation.
Yeah.
I hear you that can't go on forever, but still 80% of our energy is from fossil fuel, so it's not going away tomorrow.
Right.
Oh no.
And I think everybody, and I shouldn't say everyone, there certainly is across the political spectrum some reservations on the speed of transition given current situation. So in any event, I think you made a good decision if that's where it came out. So I want to support it and apologize again that I couldn't be there.
Yeah. Thank you, John. We're always looking for new sources of revenue. Right, Reed?
Great. Good.
New and maintain.
There you go, long term.
Okay. Any other items, Rick, before we move on to?
That's all.
Okay,
That's
great.
all,
Thank
Jordan.
you. Okay, Luke, you're up in the batter's circle. We've just talked a lot about some of the things that you hit, but would you like, are there other areas, other reports, other areas, other subjects that you'd like to share? I think we talked about core competencies a little bit. You can always elaborate on that if you'd like to, but the mic is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and I will try not to swing and miss to continue the baseball analogy. I gave you a pretty thorough update early on. I think moving from kind of the synthesis to perhaps a little bit more analysis of that update. One thing that kept coming up over and over in our committee's discussion of core competencies is how the agency, how the ACHP makes excellent use of interns. We have in the past, we are, and we plan, and if anything, we've expanded them, at least during my time. And, so you look at this challenge, and I think Reed has set it up really clearly in terms of you have the immediate need, and then there's a longer term need in terms of developing a workforce. And so again, a little analysis, just Ann Walker earlier today brought up the use interns again. So it just kind of keeps coming up, and what I'm extrapolating from that discussion is that it could be possible in terms of our current and past qualified interns to make them aware of these openings. I mean, it seems to be a very low-hanging fruit here, and if interested and qualified, perhaps helping them to navigate what could be a complicated application process for some of them. And I say this because in the longer term, internships are things that students want. I mean, we're looking at all of the constituents here. Internships are something students want, and employers like them, and certainly they help them to develop the direct applicable skill set that they need to pursue careers in historic preservation. Academic programs want them. So I just want to throw that idea out there. The internships in various facets keep coming up over and over again. And they're certainly part of our current and past workforce that we might be able to utilize once again to meet this pressing challenge, in addition to the longer term. So I think that kind of wraps up that part of the discussion, and I'll be ready to jump in here on other reports.
Great. Okay. Yeah, let me just say about interns. Being a former intern of the advisory council, when I met with this year's class of interns, I pointed that out, that you might wind up as vice chair of the advisory council if you stay with us. So I think that's it. I'm delighted to see that that program moving forward, and would hope for even more interns if we have the capacity to deal with it. So yeah, very important. Okay, other reports.
Sure. And one final thought on interns is just, it helps us to get them early when they're eager, they're idealistic. And, sometimes what someone needs for a career choice to stick is to put a human face on a career choice. Yeah. And it allows them kind of that practical experience. I just can't say enough about that, but I will move on to other subjects. We had two other kind of key discussions I'll briefly update members on. The one was on HBCU engagement, which has been a long-term project. We asked members to think about how they can engage with HBCUs and build networking opportunities with those students of those institutions. CAC Slick suggested revisiting the idea of a speakers bureau, which I think is something you, Jordan, brought up at one point too, perhaps of ACHP alums, and developing a list of topics they can cover with HBCU partners. Of course, with this and all of the things we're discussing, it's how much can a fairly small staff of CEO handle, and where does this live? CAC also made a good suggestion, I thought, that as we return cautiously and carefully to more in-person events, and perhaps in the future we'll have lots of hybrid events, but how in-person events are also important, and having that personal touch and that contact with these institutions and reaching them in a variety of ways. And then I think that our last substantive conversation was this, call it an emerging partnership, which is going on with the Library of Congress. Both Jordan and Susan Glimsher met with Library of Congress leadership, and we might be able to do some work with them and their collections connected to HBCUs, as well as with tribes. Perhaps we discussed possibly a joint intern between the ACHP and the LOC, in terms of funded by the grant money. The substantial Mellon funding that they're getting was mentioned as a possibility. John Renaud from NPS suggested polling ACHP members about any relationships they already have with the Library of Congress, and utilizing those to the fullest in terms of how we might grow this partnership in the future. And so I think that a very interesting discussion. I think by the end of it, everyone was exhausted. We got a lot of great ideas. So definitely a lot to work with going forward. And I give back the balance of my time.
Okay, I'd say that was a home run. Thanks so much. Thanks so much. So now we do have an item of new business. And I would like to call on CAC Slick, the president of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation Foundation, to talk about some of the exciting developments in that area. So CAC, you're up.
Sure. I do see that Rick Gonzalez has his hand up, so I don't know.
I'm sorry. I didn't see that.
That.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Rick, go for it. Yeah.
Just quickly, Vice Chairman, Reno and I wanted to know, when were you an intern at the ACHP?
Oh, no. Oh, you forced me into that. Okay. I was an intern in 1972. And when I joined the Advisory Council as an intern, there were only, as I recall, about, and John will know it, John's probably still on this call, I think there were only about 5. John was there, Bob Garvey was the executive director, Jack McDermott, and a couple of folks who were admin folks, Ruth Smith and Dorothy Mortensen. Can't remember. I remember all those names, but I can't remember what I had for breakfast. But that's true. Yes, that was the year.
Wonderful history.
I was born in 73.
Oh no. Want to see an acting, you want to see a vice chairman cry, huh? Okay. Thanks a lot, Kat, for pointing that question out. Appreciate that. We'll talk.
No problem. Thank you, Rick and Reno, for, actually, what I'm going to talk about, I'm sure that if Jordan was still a young and up and coming preservationist, he would want to do. So ready for this? Yeah. The ACHP Foundation and the ACHP have come up with a new program. We're looking to cultivate a new and fully representational generation of preservation leaders. So the new program we're calling is the 21st Century Leaders Fellowship. And we're asking for your assistance right now in helping us sort of put this together, but also in finding qualified candidates. The idea is that the fellowship is designed to provide early career preservation professionals with a comprehensive understanding of historic preservation policy formulation and implementation at the national level. Through an immersive hands-on experience, we see these fellows interacting with policymakers in the governmental and private sectors, both nonprofit and for-profit. Under the guidance of senior ACHP officials, they will explore how national preservation policies and programs are created and carried out, develop new networks with a dynamic professional environment, and acquire skills to prepare the fellow for a leadership role in historic preservation. We think the fellow can address a lot of issues, and after this week's worth of meetings, we see a lot of those issues that might be eligible. For example, climate change, Native American affairs, infrastructure, housing policy, regulatory systems, and so on. We'd like the fellowship to last for 6 to 9 months in Washington, D.C. if the pandemic is not upon us and the ACHP opens up again, etc. And while the fellow will be primarily lodged at the ACHP and under the tutelage of the ACHP and the foundation leadership, we want to engage other agencies and organizations in providing the fellow with a comprehensive experience. We're asking for your assistance in those two areas, providing your insights and possible participation in the program, and helping us get the word out so we can identify good, strong candidates. We are launching this today with you all, and I will put background information, which is on our website, in the chat right now. Tried to be brief for you because I realize that it's been a long afternoon, but if you have any questions, let me know.
Okay, any questions? Doing our thing for cultural resource workforce development, right?
Right. A small step forward.
Small step, right. Yeah, and what the application process is open.
It's open now. It goes through September 15th. We hope to have someone on board next January, starting and working with you all and working with the ACHP leadership, as well as other organizations.
Great. Okay, any questions for CAC? All right. Thank you, CAC. Very exciting. Very exciting.
We'll get more information out to people.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, we are going to end this meeting early. I hope you don't mind, and that the evaluations that come in afterwards, you'll fill out. Yes, I can see the applause. I would like to, though, before I end, I would like to just say thank you to Reno, Jay, Rick, and Luke. It is a privilege and a pleasure to work with all of you. You have done a phenomenal job of leading your committees, and I salute you. I really want to thank you. You do an excellent job. You inspire me, and I know you inspire all of us. And with your passion, with your leadership skills, and your creativity, for sure. So today at this meeting, I want to end by thanking you for all the wonderful work that you do and your commitment to the mission and the work of this agency. And with that, I now just want to remind you our next meeting is scheduled for October 26th. And hopefully it'll be in person and with a permanent chair. And I hereby declare this business meeting adjourned. Thank you all.